The Stolen Lake by Joan Aiken, Chapter 7. A council of war was held in Dido's bedroom at the Sydney Hotel. The participating members were Lieutenant Windward, Mr. Multiple, Dido, Plum, and Noah Gusset. Mr. Holystone had fallen into a high fever, and the doctor was perplexed by his condition, which did not respond to treatment. "How do we come to his weight?" he said, not too happily or confidently. "I'm afraid the air of Bath does not agree with your friend." "You mean to tell me that this old girl believes she's King Arthur's widow?" Mr. Multiple incredulously demanded of the two who had visited the palace. "Round Table King Arthur, that one?" "That's what she said, didn't she, Miss Twite? Seemed to believe it, too. She's clean gone to her wits, of course, rats in the garret. But the thing is, what are we going to do? She's got Captain Hughes in the lockup. For all we know, she's liable to chop his head off, or have it shrunk like the ones in the waiting room if we don't keep her sweet." "Yes," said Multiple doubtfully. "But even if Miss Twite goes to this King Mabon and lets on to be his daughter, how do we know that'll help the captain? It sounds to me like a totty-headed scheme. First, Miss Twite doesn't look like any princess, axing your pardon, Miss Twite." "Oh, call me Dido, can't you?" said Dido impatiently. "Of course I don't look like a princess. So it's odds but King Mabon would twig our wheedle right from the start, and then we'll be rolled up too, probably thrown into jail in Lyonesse, and he won't give back the old lady's lake." "Supposing he did steal it," said the lieutenant skeptically. Dido thought of the mysterious procession she had seen through the captain's telescope, all those loaded llamas slowly making their way over the mountain tops with their heavy burdens. "But wait," she said to herself, "I saw that after Captain Hughes had the message about the theft. Still, maybe llamas travel very slowly, especially with a heavy load, and maybe going only at night. Maybe it would take them 2-3 weeks to go from New Cumbria to Lyonesse. I reckon the lake was stolen," she said slowly. "If it was stole, then King Mabon ought to return it," said Noah Gusset, with stolid justice. Plum, surprising everybody, said, "Mayhap she do be King Arthur's widow." They all stared at him, and he turned brick red, but went on. "When I were a boy in Usk, my grandma'd be telling us about King Arthur. Come back one day, she said he would, no matter how long, sleeping in the mountain, him, till his time be come, with his knights around him, and when his time be come, he'd pull his sword out of the rock again, and put on his golden crown." "Oh, flummery," said Lieutenant Windward irritably. "Anyway, even if that was so, how could his widow survive him for 1,300 years? The old medico Captain Hughes fetched in for old Holystone said the climate up here was supposed to be devilish healthy," said Mr. Multiple. "Not for poor Holystone it ain't. Nor for all the young girls taken by the Aurochs," said Dido. Then she stopped short. A perfectly horrible idea had come into her head. It was so strange and so frightening that she did not like to utter it aloud. Instead, she said slowly, "I've a kind of notion. I believe I know where King Mabon's daughter might be." They all stared at her in amazement. "You do?" said Mr. Multiple. "How can that be?" "I better not say here." Dido glanced around the room. "I don't trust this place above half." She looked under the bed. "What happened to the cat?" she asked Mr. Multiple. "It dashed out when I opened the door." "I reckon we better play along with the old lady a bit," Dido went on, in a very low tone. "Say we'll go visit this King Mabon. That can't do no harm. Then we'll get a pass from the Grand What's-His-Name saying we're allowed to climb Mount Damiac and Mount Catamole and Mount Catalonde, and the other one, Mount Araby," she thought. Captain Hughes was thrust into a smallish stone-walled room, and the door slammed behind him. He heard the rattle of bolts. For a moment or two he stood blinking, His head had been thrust into a black bag during his removal from Bath Palace. When he recovered his sight, he recognized a familiar figure in a small plump man sitting dolefully on the floor by the window with his buttons undone, his hair disheveled, and his cravat hanging in a loose tangle. He did not look up at the captain's unceremonious entry, but continued staring miserably at his own outspread fingers. "Mr. Brandywine, upon my soul! I had thought you were upon the high seas. Do you mean to tell me that hag of a queen imprisoned you too?" "I don't mean to tell you anything," retorted Mr. Brandywind, moodily. "What's the use of talking? Oh, my hands, my poor hands!" He had hunched his shoulders, turning his back rudely on the captain, who felt justifiably irritated. He had enough troubles of his own without being snubbed by this wretched little two-penny halfpenny fellow. Ignoring Mr. Brandywind's sulks, Captain Hughes inspected the room, walked across to the window, and glanced out indifferently at the magnificent prospect of Bath encircled in its ring of volcanoes. The window was very high. They were at the top of the Wen Pendragon Tower, which in its turn was at the top of Beechin Cliff. Then, discovering a second door which stood ajar, the captain went through it into a second room, where he found a large loom already strung with a warp for a carpet or a piece of tapestry. A door beyond the loom led on, and he discovered a circular suite of rooms, all interconnected and furnished with various materials for indoor occupation: a piano, a kiln, a quantity of clay, paints, canvas, wool, and needles, mathematical instruments, sewing equipment, canes, rushes, pipes, flutes. There was even a harp. What the captain did not find was any other exit apart from the bolted door through which he had been thrust by his captors. "What the deuce is this place? A collage?" he demanded, returning through a door opposite that from which he had started. "Or does Queen Ginevra propose to keep her prisoners at work weaving carpets?" The British agent looked up at him with dismal, bloodshot eyes. "Oh, no," said Brandywind. "She don't give a rap what happens to us, unless we're some use to her. No, this ain't a collage. It's a prison, but it's also King Arthur's castle, where he's supposed to be residing till he's healed of his wound." Forgetting his sulks, he imparted this information in a tone of condescension. "Oh, what fustain!" exclaimed the captain irritably. "He is not really dwelling here, I collect." "Of course he ain't, but a good few of the townspeople believe he is, and that suits the Queen's book and keeps them contented. Every month or so she buys another set of flutes or some wool and a crochet hook, just to keep His Majesty diverted during his illness. That's what all the clobber in the other rooms. That's what all that clobber is in the other rooms." "The jailers know it's not so." "Aye, but they are all dumb." "Why does she keep up the pretense?" asked the captain, shivering despite himself. "Does she really believe it herself?" "Not that he is here." "Oh, who knows what she believes?" said Mr. Brandywind morosely. "But whether she believes it herself or not, the rumour that he's in here is enough to keep King Mabon or Cademon of High Brazil from invading or snapping up New Cumbria for themselves. A sick king is better than none." I see. Why the deuce didn't you tell me all this on the Thrush?" demanded the captain. Well, I never thought you'd get as far as Bath Regis," said Mr. Brandywind. Mr. Brandywind said evasively, and about to set sail myself, preoccupied with plans for departure." "So why did you not embark? Why are you here in prison? And where are your wife and child?" At these questions, to Captain Hughes's horror, his companion began to whimper distressingly. Tears coursed down his cheeks. He rocked himself to and fro. "Oh, I am a wicked, wicked wretch," he lamented in a thin, reedy voice. "I did wrong, dreadfully wrong, and now I'm being punished for it. And worst of all, I didn't even benefit from my wrongdoing. On the contrary, oh, my hands, my poor hands." "What the devil did you do?" inquired the captain without much sympathy. I sold that child of yours, Tweetkin, whatever her name is, to Lady Attarde for our passage money, 500 gold bezants.
Sold Miss Twite to Lady Attarde? Exclaimed the captain in wrath and astonishment. As a slave, do you mean? How can you have sold her? She was not yours to sell.
Oh, I shouldn't have done it, I know, blubbered Brandywind. And anyway, it didn't do me a particle of good, because those two cursed witches, Morgan and Vavasour, they never got their hands on the brat. The little monster escaped. They wouldn't give me the ready after all, the cheating harridans. So the boat sailed without us, and my wife and child are lost forever, and worst of all...
What's become of your wife and child?
But at this question, Mr. Brandywind went wholly to pieces, rocking, gulping, and gibbering. The only words Captain Hughes could distinguish among those he gasped were, "Hunted to death! To death!" A grisly thought flashed into the captain's mind.
Hunted? Good God, you can't mean that hunt in the forest.
If she can't get them by other means, she'll send her hellhounds after them. Captain Hughes shuddered. He said uncertainly,
Do pray, man, pull yourself together.
He had not the heart to ask any more questions. The subject was too dreadful, and no more sense could be got from Mr. Brandywind for the time. The little agent wept and trembled and shivered, moaned that he wished he were dead, and then, in the next breath, voiced a longing to get his hands round the throat of Lady Attarde and strangle her. "Only how could I?" he wailed. "My hands don't work any more."
"How do you mean?"
demanded the captain, exasperated, after an hour or so of these continual lamentations.
"Your hands do not appear to be injured or crippled. I can see nothing amiss with them."
"But there is. She overlooked them. She was angry. She said she would teach me to cheat her. Not that I had any intention of cheating her. Indeed, I didn't. She blew on my fingers. She said, 'From now on they will be as soft as paintbrushes. That will teach you not to bamboozle me.' And they are. Look at them. I cannot even tie my cravat."
"Oh, fiddlestick, man. This must be moonshine, a mere disorder of the senses. Let me see your tie and neckcloth. Let me see you tie your neckcloth."
But if it were a delusion, it was a very deep-seated one. Mr. Brandywind fumbled limply and hopelessly with the linen neckpiece, as his fingers had lost the power to obey, as if his fingers had lost the power of obeying his will. And later, when one of the guards opened the door and thrust a basin of thin soup into the room, Captain Hughes was obliged, with disgusted reluctance, to feed his fellow captive like a baby, while Mr. Brandywind whimpered and sobbed and snuffled, repeating that he was a wicked, wicked wretch, and he wished that he were dead. Early next morning, Mr. Windward was informed that a letter had come from Her Mercy for Miss Dido Twite. "Fancy her remembering my name," said Dido, impressed, and she opened the note. It was an engraved card bidding her present herself at the palace between the hours of 4 and 5 that afternoon. "Humph," said Windward suspiciously. "I hope there isn't anything skimble-scamble about this. What do you think Dido had best do?" he said to the others. They were all assembled, shivering in the cactus gardens behind the Sydney Hotel. "Tell you one thing, if I go, I ain't a-going to put on that fancy court rig again," said Dido. "I was perishing well frozen in it yesterday, except just in the palace, and it's turned a lot colder today, and I felt a fool in it. I'll just wear me breeches and duffel jacket. Multiple and I had best come with you." Somehow, without further discussion, it had been accepted by all of them that Dido had better keep the appointment. Lieutenant Windward went on. "Plum and Gusset can stay and keep an eye on poor Holystone. Let's take a deco at that big map of Cumbria that hangs in the hotel lobby," said Dido. "Try and see how long it'll take us to get to King Maybon's place if we go." "What about the Grand Inquisitor, though?" said Mr. Multiple. You say he didn't want us to go to Maybon." "I don't trust him," said Lieutenant Windward. "He looked about as straightforward as an adder. I reckon he has his own axe to grind." "So we diddle him too? Pretend we're just pretending to visit Maybon?" "Just so's we don't get into a mucks ourselves about what we're a-going to do," said Dido. "I think maybe we should visit Maybon," said Mr. Multiple. "Maybe he's a writin'
There must be some good cove somewhere in these ramp-old parts. All we know about Mabon is he took the lake because he had his daughter stole. You can't blame him for that."
And we will pause there.